And we are live here. Nice Friday morning in California. This is Greg from Pixel Fondue. I've got game artist James Brady with me today
Hey.
from the UK. Although it looks kind of sunny out there. Is that just the lighting or is it actually the sun shining today?
Yeah, it's pretty sunny today. I have clear skies. It's been quite rainy and cloudy over the last week, so yeah, it's nice.
Yeah, there you go. All right. And it's still light out, so that's good. That's such a huge time difference between California and the UK.
Yeah, definitely for sure.
So, James contacted me, and as people sometimes do, and we chatted a little bit. He had worked with Warren Marshall, well known in the games industry and moto sort of community here, and you've worked on you're doing some PUBG stuff with Warren, right?
Yeah, I worked on PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, worked on the desert map Miramar.
Oh, okay, cool. So, we're gonna just chat a little bit about how James got to where he is, a game artist here in the industry. He's worked on a lot of titles like Hitman 2 and PUBG, of course, and The Forest, and a number of others. Currently, we can say working on
Sea of Thieves
Sea of
and
Thieves.
System Shock 3.
System Shock 3, which I'm excited about, being an old school gamer here. And, let's talk a little bit about how you got where you were. Then we'll talk a little bit about your workflow, things like that. And then, we'll take a look at some of your artwork and sort of chat about that a little bit and just kind of keep it chill. Sound good?
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah.
All right. So let's start from the beginning. Like, how did you get to where you're at, working on a AAA? Well, Sea of Thieves is a AAA game, really. At least it has the
Yeah.
aura of one. I mean, I think it maybe it started out as maybe a smaller title, perhaps, but it certainly is got the press of a AAA game. So how do you get to that place? How long did it take you to get your foot in the door, and where did you start?
Um, wow. So I mean, it depends how far back you want to go. I mean, like if we go back to like when I first got into video games.
Let's go way back. When people ask me, I go back to watercolor painting when I was a kid. So go way back because you're doing artwork, and probably the first artwork you did wasn't on a computer. I'm guessing.
No, like okay. So basically, when I started out, it was my dad worked at a graphic design company in the city we lived in, which was Belfast in Northern Ireland, and he used to sneak me into work after hours.
Oh, cool.
And they had the original, I think it was the Apple Macintosh 2 computers, and they had a Syndicate and Marathon, from Bungie, and they were pretty much the very first games that I played, and we would like bash away at multiplayer with like cookies and stuff.
Uh-huh.
And that kind of started my getting the gears turning into my interest in video games. And then I remember my dad getting the PlayStation 1 for Christmas, and that was the first time I seen 3D, and I was just completely blown away. I was like, what is this?
Yeah,
you
PlayStation
know
1 like really brought 3D to the forefront. I mean, I know on Nintendo, I think a Super Nintendo maybe had a little bit of that, but
yeah.
I remember when PlayStation 3 coming out in their marketing material, they were like pushing 3D.
Yeah, like that was like PS2 really, like the graphics and that were insane. um so then it basically got to my years of school, and during the high school years, I mean, when I was younger, I absolutely hated art. Like I hated everything to do with art,
Oh, really?
and yeah, and I never had an interest in being an artist. Like I was more kind of like a math and science head, so I wanted to like get a degree in science or something of those lines. And because my dad's an artist, I mean, he's a really good one, and my teachers at the school would always refer to him and be like, "Oh, like, your dad's a great artist. Surely you can like pump out some awesome work." And the topic even more because I was like, oh, I really hate art, and then like it was more pressure, and I've never been good at like 2D drawing or anything. Um, and then I think it was like Christmas time. My parents bought me Halo 2 for the Xbox, and it came with like a making of DVD, and I watched it, and it really just kind of it really made me realize like, wow, okay, this is actually what I want to do with my life. And I like used to just watch it over and over and over and be like, just for inspiration and drive. And yeah, from that point, then I started getting interest into 3D and on the art side, and I used to borrow my mom's laptop and try and learn Maya. And I mean, I absolutely hate Maya. But
It's a little daunting, especially at what age were you when you were doing that?
oh god, it was like I think it was like 15, 14 or
Yeah,
15.
that it's a little daunting. Maya's a little daunting, I'm guessing, for a 15-year-old, you know.
Yeah, it's like all like the sub menus and the toolbars and everything. I'm like, how do I
Yeah.
even create a cube? Like this is crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, hard to dip your foot into Maya. I remember when I first started Maya, it was Maya 3, like way back, like 98 or
Oh,
something. And this was, it came, the document, this is when they shipped documentation. The manuals came in I think I saw them somewhere, 3 boxes like this big. Like it was like 100 pounds of manuals. This is back when they just shipped all the manuals and everything. Of course, the software was like $30,000 at the time or something. So
jeez,
you
that's
could
crazy.
pay for it. But yeah. So Maya, a little daunting. So maybe okay. So go on.
Yeah, so basically, then I kind of continued through school, and I knew then I wanted to do game development. Um, and the thing about Ireland is there's no, well, there wasn't a games industry when I was at school. I mean, it was still very much, it was still very much seen as the kind of thing that you, almost like a phase, like okay, you actually can't make a career out of this. You know, it's sort of like you know, you can do it for fun, but you have to get a real job still. You know. Um, and then when I left school, there was courses available, but they were very much on the programming front, so there was nothing really on the art spectrum. Um, and I decided to pursue like a 1 year diploma course in game design. And during that year, then I just started teaching myself like the fundamentals, like learning like 3ds Max, learn how to use Photoshop, and I remember being so proud modeling like a simple basic chair of cubes and like placing materials on it and being like, oh my god, I made a chair.
Yeah,
And
but there's something a little bit magical about doing that for the first time,
yeah,
and making
really,
something and spin around because then the gears start to go, right? Like
yeah,
make Star Wars 5. You get start really big. You start thinking like I could do anything, and then like years later, reality sets in. Like, oh, this is actually really. It's like hard to make a ton of stuff, but
yeah.
you know, can't
like
make my own movie, but I can make some stuff.
like I remember during that year, like in that course, I met a guy and his name's Ainsley, and him being also a huge Epic fan and Gears of War fan, and we both like vibed off each other, and we're like, oh yeah, we're totally going to make like the next best thing to Gears of War, and then like after we were like, yeah, that isn't going to happen.
Right, I know. That's like it's yeah, totally. It was more attainable in my day. Like when I was in high school, we're talking. Well, the very first Nintendo had come out, so you had Mario, but computer games. There were still like text-based computer games. So,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
simple, like like Ultima 3 was a huge game, like way back. A little more. It seemed like a little more attainable. Like because the people who made these were just teams of like half a dozen people or something. It's like
yeah.
this is before Doom, the original Doom. Even was a few years
Well,
after that. So, but I know what you're saying. But so you got into it. You took it seriously. It didn't just sort of float out there as a dream job. You pursued it and learned how to.
yeah.
Do it.
I mean, it was tricky because after I finished and I was trying to learn my portfolio and work on it, um, I became familiar then with like websites like Polycount, and it took a few years to kind of really go for it. And there was a few years back and forward of kind of, oh, okay, I'll try and push myself, and then it was like, okay, I think I'll go and do something else, like a degree in music, whatever. So there was a lot of back and forth, and then I eventually, when I hit 24, I was kind of in a situation where I was like, okay, it's either I go for this now and make it happen, or it doesn't happen. So I just literally quit my job and like done all nighters on my portfolio and my work, and just kept churning out models and applying for jobs, and having interviews with like Ubisoft, and then in like September 2015, I decided, okay, well, I'm not exactly at the artist level, so I'll kind of take a little step back and go for like a QA or like a tester position. And then Creative Assembly reached out and they were interested in me becoming a tester on Total War. So thankfully, after an interviews, then I had the chance to join them. and then I relocated over to Horsham in England and began working on Total War Warhammer. Yeah.
So creative assembly. So, first I want to say is I hear this over and over talking to people in the industry. It's always the people who focus in and hammer down. It's always starts off with big ideas, a bit of a dream, like, oh, I'd love to be in this industry, but this never happens for anybody. And then they start learning some software and they kind of get over the hump where they kind of know it. And at some point you have to narrow your focus, right? So I'm not going to make the next Halo game. I'm going to make a really awesome gun. And I'm going to make 12 of those. I'm going to hone my craft. I'm going to keep hammering away and get your word out there, contact companies, put yourself out there, show up to user meetings, whatever, be a tester. I hear that there's a number of people that do things like that, or even start in coding or just customer support. Brad Peebler, who used to was the president of one of the founders of Luxology prior to Moto, he started off in customer support at Newtek, who used to make a program called Lightwave, or they still do, I guess.
Okay.
So he started off in customer support, answering telephones, and worked his way up to the president of the company. But I see this over and over. But Creative Assembly, I forgot that you had worked for them, because they make one of my favorite games of all time. Which I don't know if they were doing that while you were there, but Alien Isolation I thought was awesome. I love that game.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. I mean, it was essentially my attraction to join the company. I was just like, this game's amazing. I want to work at Creative Assembly, and then I joined them and they were like, oh, okay, yeah, we're actually just doing Total War. So it was a bit like, oh, okay. But still, this is exciting regardless, And they were also working on Halo Wars 2 at the time. But I really hope that they might revisit the Alien Isolation game, make a sequel to it, because they really nailed it. That was phenomenal.
Oh, yeah, I thought so too. And which was interesting to me, because Creative Assembly wasn't known for that type of game. They're more like the Total War series, exactly. Things like that. And for the first sort of foray into that sort of game, first-person game, but also I guess it's its own thing. There is nothing quite like Alien Isolation, the sort of first-person survival heart attack simulator, whatever you want to call it.
I mean, there was Alien Colonial Marines, but yeah, it was nothing near
different. Different kind of game, right?
It's like an arcadey sort of just shooter.
Yeah. Isolation was the only game I think I crouch walked through the entire game. I don't think I ever stood my character up the entire game. Her knees were hurting after about 100 hours in there. So okay, so cool. So you had Creative Assembly, and then where'd you move on from there?
So I worked for a year at Creative Assembly, and I knew that I still wanted to pursue an artist position. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to actually get into any artist roles at CA. So I seen that Rockstar were hiring for an artist, like a junior artist.
Uh-huh.
And I decided to reach out, kind of with I didn't think I'd have a chance. I was like, we'll shoot for it. And then lo and behold, they reached out for an interview, and then I went up to the office and spoke with the team, and they kind of gave me a rundown of the project. And then after a month or two, I got a job offer and started at Rockstar on Red Dead Redemption 2, which was insane.
Oh man! I just watched a little video on Red Dead 2 this morning before while drinking some coffee. There are people are starting to get play for a couple hours for the first time, and just the depth of that game, the simulation looks really awesome. But man, please make a PC version. I played GTA 5 on PC. I was so happy they brought that over, and I'm a hardcore old school PC gaming snob. And man, I want Red Dead 2 on PC. But so that's great. So you're at Creative Assembly. You got your foot in the door. You're doing some game testing there, and you wanted to move up to an artist position, but it wasn't available. And that sometimes is the case. But you got a contact by Rockstar, another gigantic company. Now Rockstar, they're down in LA, right? I mean, did you move, or can you work remotely, or are they in LA?
No, they have two offices in UK, one in Scotland, and then they've 3 studios in the US, one in Canada. So is that one of the UK offices, one of their studios?
Right. Oh, okay. So cool. So you didn't have to pack your bags and move, and you got in and did a little Red Dead. So when you're working, when you are sort of first showing up, okay, I finally got my job as an artist. They're paying me for this. Like, what's your mindset first showing up? Because like Rockstar, I mean, you don't get much bigger than that in the gaming industry. They're one of a handful of some of the biggest studios out there, and most
Yeah.
recognizable. You're working on what's going to be one of the most anticipated titles ever launched. It must have been exciting, but you probably were a little nervous, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, yeah, like it was a little intimidating at first, especially trying to, having to get used to like the pipeline and, their tools and all of that. But I find after like 6 months, I naturally kind of just slotted into doing it. And then I was kind of able to do more beyond my position per se, and just basically had more kind of artistic creativity, I guess, over certain aspects of the world art. Um, can't say very much about it, but yeah, like definitely, I just was able to kind of dive in and get my hands dirty more on different aspects, like like working on buildings or stuff like that.
Well, just in general terms, it seems like when you're working for a company, there's probably ways to advance within a company or to show, kind of show your stuff and not be pigeonholed into the guy making the ashtrays or, whatever. Right.
It's funny you say that. There was one guy who was pigeonholed into just doing railway tracks for the entire project. We're like, oh my god, like 6 years of just working on railway tracks.
Did they find him like hanging from a tree outside of Rockstar? I heard there was a guy at ILM who worked on Return of the Jedi where I don't know if you remember, but they had those windows with the sort of like all those like, little oval cutouts in them all throughout the Death Star. And he had a rotoscope, like just millions of those.
Oh my god.
I think I heard about like went crazy.
Yeah. Wow.
Oh man, all the train. Your job for the next 6 years is to make train tracks.
Yeah. Like I'm sure for the first 6 months it's probably interesting, but after that, no, God.
There's actually some good bit of advice where it's like, don't be the only person who's really good at one thing.
Because exactly.
It's like if you're the only guy who knows how to hook up the projector, so to speak, at the meetings, you're always going to be the guy to hook up the projector. So
don't get super
good at one job. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like as soon as you get in, try and hone your, craft in as many different ways as possible. So, you won't ever be pigeonholed.
Yeah. That's a good story. That's a good like tale of warning here. So, all right. So, what happens a lot in talking to people who work in the game industry is that games are worked on very hard and diligently for a number of years. Then they launch, and sometimes you have to go find a new job, or maybe there's an opportunity to go find a new job. But how did you go from Rockstar to where you're at now?
So essentially, thankfully, it wasn't a case of being laid off or anything like that. It was more just like, okay, I've worked on this. I've essentially kind of outgrown my position. I'm a lot better as an artist, and I find like in retrospect, I get bored very quickly if I'm on a project for a very long time. So I like to kind of taste all the flavors and get my feet in where I can. And I seen that PUBG were hiring, and I applied for it. And then Sean, the lead artist in the studio in Madison, reached out via email, and he was like, "Hey, we love your work, we love your experience, we love you to come on board." And we had a bit of back and forth, and initially it was me moving over to Madison to join them, but unfortunately, immigration and visas and that, it wasn't possible. So then they were like, "Yeah, just join us remotely. We'll do like a full-time 6-month contract to get Murmur out the door, and you'll have like your hands on deck, and you'll really get stuck in." So I started with them after I left Rockstar. And at this time, I kind of declared myself. I was like, well, I guess I'm a freelancer now. It kind of wasn't planned, but it just happened, which was a little nerving at the start.
Right.
But yeah, it was really great. And then obviously I then realized, oh, Warren's on the project as well. So this is really cool. And we started working on it. And I mean, I don't think PUBG had as much traction as it has now when we started working on it. I think it was still like early alpha. And at the time, I didn't really know what the project was, and leaving Rockstar to go work on such a small game at that time, I felt a bit like, oh God, I hope I'm not going downhill rather than uphill. And then over time working on Miramar, the game just exploded.
Yeah,
Like,
really, it became quite a phenomenon. Did you anticipate that when we were working on it? Were you like, dude, this game's gonna rock? Or were you like, I don't know, nobody's gonna play this?
well, no, I mean, like, we enjoyed the game. We thought it was great, but none of the guys on the team had any idea that it was going to be as huge as it is. I mean, we literally watched it day by day, climb to the highest playing game on Steam. Like, it
So,
was,
so why? So, can I ask about this? Like,
yeah,
I
sure.
stopped playing multiplayer shooters a while ago just because I wanted to. I just couldn't. Like the time sucked. Like, like so. My rules are don't play games that don't end. So I haven't played
Yeah.
PUBG. But it looked like its ascension was up the Steam charts was sort of a grassroots effort. But I don't was it simply the vast number of players in a single battleground that made it like as they used to play Counter-Strike stuff like that? Like what is it that gave PUBG that the jetpack to get to the top? What is it about that game?
It's something that none of us can answer, but on in reflection, I think it's the fact that it's really not scripted in any shape or form. I mean, you jump into a match, you're in a plane with 100 other players. You're going over an island, you jump out, you loot, and you survive. And I think it's because there was so much freedom for players in it and so much choice on how they can approach each match and just a lot of replayability. And I mean, it's probably one of the funnest games I've ever played. And so I can see in that point that it got huge, but I think it was just a phenomenon in other ways. Like it's unexplainable as to how it grew, so big in popularity. Like it's
Yeah, I started seeing, YouTube videos with, just people doing weird stuff in PUBG. And I think, yeah, if you throw, maybe part of the magic was you throw that many people in the same room and they start doing weird stuff with vehicles or doing like crazy stunts and they get those videos up on YouTube, this sort of this propagating, phenomenon where people start checking it out it was sort of ground zero for that. I'm guessing Fortnite owes some success nods to to PUBG.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, I think like Fortnite among many other games have just took the concept of PUBG and just replicated it.
Yeah, that's kind of what it sounds like. It just sounds like they got to put a bunch of people in the same room and call it the same thing. Because Fortnite, I remember the old Fortnite, trailers or whatever looked like they were pushing the game as a multiplayer, like small multiplayer, like a small team versus all the monsters that came in at night.
Yeah,
Build the
yeah,
fort, and that's what it was supposed to be. And they sort of saw the success that PUBG was having, perhaps, and then hey, let's release our own beta of a battle royale.
yeah, and it's weird because I remember I think like Fortnite was in development since 2014 because I remember seeing ad posts for jobs on it, and that's 4 years and an entire project, and then PUBG comes out and you decide to copy a multiplayer mode, and all of the rest of the game is just scrapped because nobody plays Fortnite for that now. They play it because it's Battle Royale. So it's crazy, like it's crazy how things can change.
Yeah, it'd be weird to work on that game too and like put all this effort into this whole other aspect and be like, just do this battle royale thing at the last minute. It worked for these guys. Whatever. So when you're working for these companies, especially as a remote operative, so to speak, do they say, look, you need to use Maya, this is our pipeline, or you need to use Max, or you need to use Moto, or do they kind of let you do what you want? And as long as there's some sort of format you can export to.
Yeah, I mean, essentially you kind of get documentation, so they'd be like, okay, well, this is how we do things in the studio, and this is our presets for like substance painter on exporting, or we would prefer if you can use Maya, but you have to bring all your models into, or you can use Max, but you have to bring all your models into Maya and set them up, and then export from Maya. Um, yeah, there's definitely different ways. I mean, when I was working on, like, for example, Insurgency Sandstorm, it was I do all my work in Max, and the final low res models I bring into Maya. I set up the collision and all of that, and then I send the Maya files over to the studio. Um, and then they usually send you like a preset for Painter. So if you're using Substance Painter, they just like, okay, export through this preset, and it's like all our materials packed in the correct way or such. Um, yeah, and then it's usually just documentation on like, okay, well, this is our like ideal trice count budgets, and this is our ideal, texture resolutions, and yeah, like they're always very accommodating, and they really help you kind of just get into the groove, so to speak, when you start.
Is it best to be really good at one program or pretty or decent at two or three?
I would say a decent at two or three. I mean, like, sure, it would be awesome to have mastered like 3ds Max, but it goes a long way to know how to navigate the UI of Maya and import and export models. Even if you can't model, just to be able to fit a pipeline that requires that. Um, and the same with ZBrush. I mean, like, the more you know and the more you can utilize as an artist, just the wider your opportunities, become available. Because like you essentially can do anything then, really. Obviously within your specialized area, but yeah.
And if you're creating assets, do you think Substance Painter is really just a must-have at this point? Is pretty much everybody using that?
Yeah, I mean, it's weird because up to the point before of working on PUBG, I was using Quixel Suite, and it's a phenomenal program, and the guys at Quixel are really awesome at what to do as well. But from that point, a lot of the clients I've worked with have always requested, Substance Painter, and it's merely a situation of that. It helps to keep all the artists in house in line with the same, art quality, I guess, or so all the textures look the same. They're not too different. And then
Right.
it's the same with remote artists. A lot of them would send you like a folder of smart materials that they strictly abide by in the studio. So, in doing that, then all of your work's going to look exactly how it would in the studio as well.
Right, right. And so, yeah, you can expect some sort of pipeline hand-holding and ramp up time, so you can get how the studio's working, and then you sort of stick to their guidelines, and that kind of keeps you in line, especially if you're remote. It seems like that any game
Yeah.
studio that's hiring remote people would have some sort of infrastructure set up for that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's usually 9 times out of 10, it's usually Slack. That would be our main communication program. And then it would be like, Substance Painter with your smart materials and your export presets. Um, and sometimes you might even get a chance to actually grab like a build of their game, or or the Unreal Engine they're using.
Right.
And you'd be able to set up a test bed then and that. So, you'll make sure that all your work's one to one with, I guess, what they're receiving on their end, so there's not too much differentiation. Which of course, avoids having a lot of back and forth, and kind of allows you just to get shit done, basically.
Yeah. Do you ever feel like it's just too much? Like you've got, a modeling program, maybe you may have Moto or Maya or Max or whatever, and then you've got Substance Painter thrown in. If ZBrush is sort of an expected skill set as well. Then you've got to bring in like an engine. You don't have to be an expert, but you got to be able to load up an asset and view it and navigate as basically navigate the UI. Is it overwhelming at some point?
No, weirdly enough, I've never felt overwhelmed. I mean, I think for every project you start on, you're always going to have your first days or first jitters per se. You'll have maybe the first model you make won't be so great, or maybe you'll have a little bit of trouble at the start. But I think after you've been doing it for a long time and you get familiar with all the applications, it becomes very natural. So you don't ever think twice, or you don't have to worry. You just kind of how to hit the ground running on it, and you basically the only kind of thing that you would have a bit of back and forth on would be kind of maybe, I guess, the art direction, if it's like stylized or realistic or such. But no, I've never had that. I mean, Yeah, like I mean, I would love to learn Modo eventually and get really good as substance designer, but I guess it's. I guess if it came a case that okay, all studios are now just looking strictly for like substance designer artists or Modo artists, then it would get a bit like, oh shit, okay. But
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, I always feel like I primarily use Moto, but I always stay up to date with Maya as well because I do feel like you need to spread your even when I'm not contracted with other studios. I have my own company here, but not every program can do everything. So it's important to know at least two programs. At least have a grasp of the second
yeah,
one, even if you're an expert in one. But I do feel like a little overwhelmed sometimes. Like I've had. Like Substance Painter, I've had that sitting on my desktop for like a couple of years now. And I just don't have the time. I just like don't often have time to jump in there and mess around with it. And it just seems like when do you have time to like pick up a new program, or what time when you jump into ZBrush if you haven't used it for a while? It's so weird compared to other programs
yeah,
that it throws you off a bit. But I think that's
yeah.
just
No,
something you have to deal with. Yeah.
yeah, you're totally right. I mean, it's been at least a year and a half since I've done any personal art of my own. Like,
Yeah, I
I'm
know
under so
that.
much like between in-house and freelance, it's all NDA. So it's like I have a year and a half worth of work that I just can't show.
Yeah, it's actually typically when somebody's like website hasn't been up, portfolio hasn't been updated for a while, there's a good chance they're just super busy,
Yeah, exactly.
it's like here's the stuff from like 2012, but it's not like it's just been super busy. It's actually a sign of success because you haven't had time to go
Yeah, exactly.
get
I
that
mean,
stuff.
I'm hoping tomorrow to be able to get a bit of like personal art in and start kind of getting the gears turning more on that. But yeah, just been absolutely swamped with like NDA work. So
Yep, yeah, that's how it goes. Cool. So, let's talk a little bit. Let's see. So, when you're working remotely, I suppose, which is an actual pursuable career now, I think, just working
yeah.
remotely, using Slack, things like that. Lifestyle wise, how do you sort of keep yourself from staying up till 3 in the morning all the time? Do you get outside? Do you have normal human relationships? Like, how do you get on with your life while you're, you know,
Yeah, like I'm honestly that's one thing I don't think I ever achieved the balance in that when I was freelancing. Like I was literally doing well, I mean, it was probably because I was on like three projects at once. So it would literally be a case of like 12-hour days, 7 days a week.
oh, jeez.
Or had to kind of like I mean, because I was at home with my family at that time, it was, like if my mom was heading to the store or anything, I'd get away from the computer for like 15 minutes to go get a breather or go for a lunch or, something like that. But I find when I started freelancing, I find myself getting into, drone copters, like drones.
Oh,
So I would
okay.
yeah, I would go out for like an hour or two every day and just fly my drone about and kind of just get a bit of a break. But 9 times out of 10, it would literally just be like 12-hour days of just at the screen.
Yeah, those add up. Those add up fast.
Yeah.
I've been sitting in front of a computer since mid 90s, and I just wonder like if I took all the time I've looked at that render bar going across the screen and added those up,
Yeah.
how many like years of life would I add to myself?
Wow.
But it is a challenge. I mean, it is a challenge to like get out and like have a normal life because first of all you like what you're doing in general.
Yeah.
So you're it's not like you're like can't wait to get out of here and go do what stuff I actually like. You like what you're doing, so it's easy to get sucked in, stuff like that. You still so many people in this industry still have just a real curiosity about new programs and new techniques, and so they'll see like a new app come out and they're have this intellectual curiosity about it. They want to like download the demo. They want to play around with it. They'll see something cool done in Houdini, and like I can see Houdini, and I'm like, okay, I'll download the demo for like the 47th time and like play with it a little bit, because it's so cool. And yeah, it's just those are just. But again, those are more hours later on top of more hours later on top of more hours. It's one of
Yeah,
those things.
exactly. I mean, it's weird because despite like how many hours I work a day, it never feels like work. you know. And it's weird because it's so normal to me now, and because I've done it for a long time. I forget how it feels to have work, you know, to feel like, oh, I have to go to work, because it doesn't
Yeah.
feel. I mean, literally from me heading from my apartment to the studio, that's like the only transition that makes me go like, ah. But everything else is just awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. That's good. And you know, and sometimes it can be tedious or whatever, like when you're doing, you know, like fiddling around with the same thing over and over. Or if you, I don't know how
Yeah,
much you get, like, you know, you get like if you have an art director who's fairly specific and keep kind of redoing the same thing over and over till they're happy. It could be a little bit tedious, I suppose. But in general, yeah, it's a good place to be, to have a calling and have a thing that you really like to do, as opposed to like, yeah, feeling you have a job, you know, going into.
yeah.
But so let me ask this, like, and this is you don't have to be specific or anything, but just for people who are watching this who are like, okay, I want to do this, I want to get on a contract and work as a freelancer or whatever, like, how do you deal with just the normal human things, like, do you get paid like every 2 weeks, or do you get paid per project, per asset, or do you get paid, you know, how does that work with a contract position? Is there any perks, like, you know, if you live in a country like the U.S. where you don't just get healthcare, like, are there perks like that? Like, how do the nuts and bolts of being a freelancer work?
So, you know, clients are usually very flexible. I mean, you can usually negotiate like, okay, you do X amount of assets, like per asset batch, and you get like $800, whatever for that, or whatever. Or you can get paid, like you can set up like a bi-weekly payment. Like if you're full time on a project and it's like a 6 or 12 contract, you can set up and be paid bi-weekly or monthly. It's usually kind of like the shorter term projects or the shorter term contracts that you're on. You know, if you're saying, okay, we need you to do assets for a month or two, it's usually a case of if you do the work, you submit your invoice and you get paid like 30 days, you know, after. But usually on the long term ones, you know, they're quite happy to always negotiate on setting up like a, you know, consistent payment every X amount of weeks. Um, but yeah, I mean, it just depends. Like, you know, when you're working on multiple projects, you don't really worry then about that kind of, you know, the 30 days note after submitting an invoice, because you're just constantly in the flow and you're working, and you just kind of, you just see income, you know, so you don't really, it doesn't ever phase you. But when you're starting out, it can be a little stressy, you know, and it's probably best to look for something that maybe is more than 2 or 3 months and negotiate like a regular bi-weekly or monthly payment, depending on your, you know, your financial circumstances going into freelancing.
Well, do you feel it's better to try, like, for me, like, it's not gaming, I don't do gaming work, but it's production work, right? So I always recommend to people who are interested in production work to go work at a production studio for a couple of years before
Yeah,
starting their own company or looking to be a freelancer. Like, go work at a studio, because there's things you learn just
yeah,
being around other people. Like, same thing, would you say, in the games industry?
definitely. I mean, I would recommend like anyone who wants to go into freelancing full time to go work at a studio beforehand, because not only does it gain you, not only does it give you street cred, you know, and obviously you have your industry experience, but you know, a lot of studios aren't very different in how they work, you know, and the tools and management tools they use. So you could go work at X studio and learn how to use like, you know, their tools and get better at 3ds Max and learn how to use like applications like Perforce or like Jira, or, you know, for like time management and file
Right.
organization.
Perforce.
And
I remember that.
yeah, Perforce is a nightmare.
Yeah, it was
But
like, if you don't know, like, Perforce, at least when I used it, it was sort of a well, what like a what's the technical term of the software? It's like a versioning system, like, right?
yeah,
But it's
essentially,
not like, it's like DOS based or something.
yeah. Thankfully, it has a UI now, but it's still temperamental. Like it's
Oh,
there's
it
still
does.
ways
Okay.
around
I
it.
freelance at some company, like, had me come in. And I almost never do this. I don't like going into companies typically, but it's because I'm old and cranky now. But I went in a few years ago. I was like, all right, I'll come in there instead of working at my company. And they had me set up with a Perforce. I'm like, what the F is this? It was just like this command line that you had to type in all these commands to submit your changes to the system. And anyway, but point is, like, companies have stuff like that you're going to have to deal with, and it's not just punching your card in, right? So and even though it may not be the exact same program between companies, it's a similar kind of thing. So you get your head wrapped around that kind of stuff if you're actually working in a company.
Yeah, and I mean, you'll often find, you go work at X company, you learn perforce, you learn how to communicate within a team, have your daily stand-ups and be able to just be a part of a team and deliver as an artist and, all of the rest that you naturally become better at. You often find when you go into like a freelance position, like if it's a long-term position, like a remote position with a company, like they'll set you up with like perforce and they'll expect you to pretty much abide by all of that. So it makes getting into that a lot easier. So companies don't have to try and wing you into like using, file management software or, like task management or logging your time or it goes a long way to work in companies before you freelance because it helps build your confidence, it helps build your ability, and then obviously you have more experience on your belt, so you're worth more as a freelancer than just being like, hey, I have like 5 models on my portfolio, I'm self-learning,
Right. Yeah.
I'm
Like
working.
even if you're just testing, like when you started out as a tester, you like learn how the company's going to work, right?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, you learn optimization, you learn how to profile, you learn you just develop a natural understanding of game development and you know how to overcome problems or like kind of assist with keeping like graphical budgets down or there's a lot that you regurgitate and gain through working at studios before you become a freelancer because if you go as a freelancer at the start it would be a little nerving and intimidating because
Yeah.
you know
Yeah, so get out there if you're not into this industry, yeah, and you're interested, like get out there, put yourself out there. I don't care if you're getting people coffee, like get yourself in a studio and see how things work on the inside. I'm actually James, I think I'm gonna share my screen here and just take a look at some of the artwork that you do have in your site, which you're able to put up there. But let me do this, and hopefully my screen is being shared. I should probably check.
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
So I think it's being shared.
I can see it.
So yeah, so let's just here's a couple of things that jump out at me. I was just looking at some of your stuff here. Like here's a bunch of assets you've made. Looks like some newspaper things, and when you're filling up a 3D world, right? There's just a lot of this kind of stuff that you have to do.
Yeah. It's literally just like milestone sprints, like weekly milestone sprints of just making assets.
Right, right. I like that. So what game is this? Identity. This is
Yeah. So there's a small company in Ottawa, Ontario, called Asylum Entertainment, and they're working on a MMO project called Identity, which I think comes out soon. I'm not sure. Um, but they basically have like a town square area where like all the players can hang out and communicate before they go in and do different things. And
Mhm.
these are just like newspaper things for that town square, and they kind of get like an update of I guess what's happening in the game world, and on the newspapers, and then obviously you have a coffee because you can make like coffee, and then you can get apartments in it. So like the bottom one's just like some decorative stuff for the walls, just like that.
Right, right. Yeah, it's funny. Like, there's just so much stuff, right? When creating these worlds. One, I wonder, you have something like Red Dead Redemption 2, or they've just created GTA 5 a few years ago. I mean, I guess those are different time periods. But I look at companies: are they going to just start reusing things, or are they just going to kind of rebuild, new coffee makers for the next game as well? I mean, what do you think about that?
Well, you do find a lot of times they reuse. I mean, they'll take a model, they might change it up a little bit and retexture it, but yeah, like I mean, companies have all the source files. They have like the high poly models, the low poly models. So yeah, it would make sense for them to try and reuse where they can. To save costs and time. And I mean, you often find like if a company has an in-house engine, or even if they're using Unreal and they ship a project, when they start in the next project, for the first 6 months, that new game still has the UI and everything of the old game, so they're just trying to kind of like migrate rather
Right.
than just scrapping everything and starting over, because that it's just that ends up being too much time, and
Right. Yeah. Again, it's just like a lot of stuff. And knowing like when you're getting into this industry, they're going to ask you to make a file cabinet. You're not necessarily going to make the BFG as your first job or
no,
whatever, right?
never.
Or ever, right? And so, yeah, you have to be able to do a wide variety of things. So, I have a question for you on this. Like, for a game artist, when you have to make a coffee pot or a wheel or something, is there a number of segments you just always start off with or shoot for, or do you start doing high polys and then worry about that later?
Yeah, so I mean, for myself personally, when it comes to making assets, I would like, gather reference, or usually clients, like if they send you a prop task, they would have reference and all the requirements needed for that. So I literally just look at that reference. If I feel I need like a better image of a wheel, I just go into Google and type in like trailer wheel, and find a nice wheel. And then just start on the high poly model and just model it out, and get the text in, get the wheel grooves in, and just send it over and be like, hey, does this look okay? And if they're like, yeah, good, then I just push on, get the low poly done, bake and texture it, and then if another pass is needed, just polish the textures.
Somebody, Sunny is saying Insurgency. I love that game. So,
Yeah.
this one, The Forest, is appealing to me. I haven't played it, but this is a survival game, or survival horror type game. Yeah.
Yeah, the forest. Yeah, it's really good. It's funny, right? Because the gear, the little cog gear on the third image, yeah, third image down, I think until they released the 1.0 version, it was like a little placeholder model. It was like a little white thing that was just on like the inventory.
Ah,
And I mean, I've played the forest. I haven't played a lot of it. So when they asked me to make that, I was like super stoked. I was like, oh, I get to make like the little cog that appears. And it was funny because like the forest being a jungle or forest environment, and there's nothing, modern architecture about it. I When they asked me, they were like, "Oh, so we want you to make all these like, like a shower thing and a toilet, whatever." I was like, "What the fuck? Like this isn't the forest. What is this?" And I had no idea that it would have been in like the new ending cinematic. So that was quite a treat.
oh yeah, cool. We got some PUBG stuff here,
Yeah.
and this is Miramar, one of the maps.
I still have so much to upload. Like I made so much shit for that map. It's crazy.
So is it fun to play a game and see your stuff in it, or do you look at your stuff
Yeah,
and go, "Man, I really effed up that fence over there. I should have." Or I mean, do you see your own errors, or do you just kind of like it's a real rush to just kind of
it's
see your stuff?
it's interesting because PUBG was the first game where I actually seen my shit in it, and it was just like at the start, it was like, I mean, looking back now from all my experience and such, there's definitely a few models I would have made a lot better, and when I see them in game, I'm just like, oh, that sucks. But in retrospect, when PUBG the Miramar map shipped, I was just completely stoked to like run past my oil thing and like shoot it and be like, "That's mine," or you
That
know,
thing's awesome. That looks great. Yeah.
or like watch Deadmau5 play it because he's like my favorite EDM artist and he's jumping on my weights and stuff in
Right.
his area, and I'm like, that's my bucket list ticked, all in one,
Oh yeah.
But
And
it
do
is
we,
good. Like I always try to keep an eye out, like to see if anyone glitches on my models or anything on YouTube. But I've not seen anything yet.
I like this. Like this kind of this little piece reminds me a little bit of Far Cry 2. There was some stuff like this
Yeah.
back in Far Cry
Wow.
2.
Yeah. That's actually a good point.
Yeah, that
I
was
think.
good.
Sorry. I think the other thing too is like I'd be in the studio with the guys and we like hang out after work and have pizza, beers, and play PUBG, and like they know I worked on it, and then they see my stuff, or I see my stuff, and I'm like, hey, I made that, and there's just that really kind of like nice underlying feeling of like, wow, not only have I worked on such a huge game, but I'm playing with other guys here, and they can physically see the things I've made in it. So it's definitely rewarding. You know, despite obviously like the millions of other players that will probably shoot something that I've made.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's great. I mean, it is like a rewarding feedback loop. I think games, especially, maybe more than movies, where yeah, you might obviously see your stuff up on the screen, but games, I mean, it's so interactive and being able to sort of revisit it again and again is really cool. I love floor panels. I could just look at floor paneling or sci-fi panels all day, some sort of floor panel fetish. But yeah, those are really cool. What game is this? I haven't heard of this one.
Yeah, so it's a company in Birmingham called Flex Interactive. They have their own IP, which is Evenstar, which is like an open world, like sci-fi exploration game. And yeah, I've made some stuff for it. You know, I made like shipwreck pieces,
Yeah.
rocks. You know, like
Well, these
rock.
jumped out at me a little bit because hadn't seen a lot of environmental work in your portfolio here. But what is it like creating sort of this larger scale stuff versus a newspaper stand? Is it a different approach?
Not necessarily. There's definitely a bit of a learning curve because literally, like for a newspaper stand, you know, you're in Max, you're modeling out a high poly model of it, but for all the rocks and stuff, you're getting nitty gritty with ZBrush and you're sculpting and you're using brushes and it's just a lot of practice. You know, you're looking at references of rocks and trying to really nail that kind of like rocky appearance and get the detail in. And so it definitely is like a completely different craft or practice per se.
Right, right. And so like what's your thought on something like mega scans? So, being able to just go in and buy scanned items complete with texturing. Do you view that as oh crap, this is infringing upon my craft, or is this just another opportunity to um, use them as as a resource where you're going to be taking scanned items and then reworking them to suit your specific game?
Yeah, for me, it's more like I think it's great. You know, it cuts down on budgets and time, and like time and costs. You know, obviously, money and time is important to companies, and if you're shipping something that's large scale or you're making like a CGI movie, I think Megascans offers a lot of opportunity of being able to just kitbash vegetation together or rocks that look awesome and real, and you're not having to waste man hours or money on trying to get artists to replicate that. Um, yeah, I think it's a vital resource for like larger scale projects and maybe even smaller indie teams wanting to hit that like Star Wars Battlefront detail or it just helps a lot in both ways. And I think what the guys have done at Quixel is phenomenal. And I mean, it blows me away when I see stuff in game that's photogrammetry. You know,
Yeah, yeah, I agree. It is pretty awesome. And I tend to agree with you. Like, look, everything else has gone through this. We used to take cameras and take pictures of our own textures before there were texture libraries. You used to like have to you know find some way to get music into your productions before there was vast stock music libraries or licensable music, things like that, or video
yeah,
photography. 3D assets are coming along. The world around us will be represented in 3D at some point, all of it. And so
yeah.
having more resources, and it still takes an artist to bring those in, prep them, everything else. So I think jobs are safe, yes.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't ever think like photogrammetry will place us as artists, definitely not. But like, yeah, I just think it just goes a long way, and I think we are on the edge of things being hyper realistic in 3D, especially
Hmm.
in video game worlds. Now, with like the processing power of video game consoles, but then also you have the availability of software like Megascans, it really I think there'll become a very blurred line between reality and what's not reality in a few years' time.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. So I'm looking at this particular image here on your site. This is this some personal work?
Yeah, so we actually go back to 2016 on that. So it was actually one weekend. I decided I wanted to make a small environment, and essentially, I was really loving what the guys at Dambuster Studios were doing on the new Homefront game, and I was like,
Uh-huh.
fuck, I really want to make like a school scene that's like abandoned, but has that Homefront Revolution vibe to it. And I started working on this scene, and one of my buddies were like, "Hey, this actually kind of reminds me of Silent Hill." So I was like, okay, I'll run with the Silent Hill idea." So I
Yeah,
implemented
that jumped out at me. I was thinking Walking Dead, Silent Hill sort of yeah.
and
Because
it's
it's a
funny.
little, yeah, a little that the red light in particular, that's a great touch because it gives a bit of the insidious, right? There's
Yeah,
something not right here.
yeah, and I mean, I decided to run with it, add the bunny, add the Silent Hill logo,
Yeah, there's
and I posted it online, and then like a day or two later, it just going, ended up all over like news gaming sites
uh-huh.
as like Silent Hill recreated in Unreal Engine 4, and on like Eurogamer, and like just like I mean like Jesus, there was like there was at least 6 or 7 Google pages of just websites around the world posting about it. I was just and I remember just being like, what on earth? Like what just happened?
Right. Oh man. Well, please make one for Half-Life 3. Maybe they'll like spark something.
Yeah, like funny enough, I was inspired to do like a Portal one after, but
Oh.
for some reason it never came to fruition. I mean, maybe I'll still, maybe I'll still do it, but yeah, it was crazy. It was just crazy to get like that kind of exposure and fame for a scene. It was absurd.
Well, I really like the lighting on this one. I really do. I mean, this seems like, I mean, was this fun to do? It seems like you don't maybe get to spend the amount of time you must have spent on this, getting the white and the colors, getting that sort of shiny fogging going on there in the background, and this, I mean, the greens and the reds. I mean, it's just a really great image. It looks like a painting. Yeah, I mean, do you want to do more of this kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I would love to like I'm hoping in the new year once my workload calms down a bit and I start kind of getting a bit more free time for personal art. I would love to like, do another proper environment. It's something I do miss. I miss like dressing and doing lighting and all of that because mainly at the moment it's just like asset work.
Yeah, yeah, right. I like this wrench here. I'm guessing you use Substance Painter for some of this stuff.
Yeah, so like the initial model, just high poly, low poly on max, and then baked in Substance Painter and textured in Substance Painter. And it's funny you say that because the September 3D or September Imagine FX magazine, I did a tutorial workshop on texture in Substance Painter, and this is the actual model that you know, the the people who buy the magazine can download and have the actual file to play around with.
Oh, okay, cool. Let me just jump back into video mode here. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's really cool stuff, and I especially, I bet your dad liked that. I'm guessing your dad liked that shot you did within the school hallway. As being an
Yeah,
artist, he must have,
he
must have been.
Yeah, he loved it. I mean, because my dad does a lot of illustration work, in fantasy, and he done work for Blizzard on like the World of Warcraft stuff.
Oh
And
wow.
he, I remember like he'd give me feedback on it, and a bit of back and forth. And then I remember like that Sunday finishing it and being like, okay, is it done? Like, and he was like, yeah, it's perfect. And then I just posted it, and then it just blew up everywhere.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. Where did you post that? Like, I tend to. Do you have an ArtStation page?
I used to, so that was the initial place, and then it
Right.
was like being like $10,000, and I guess like one person seeing it, and then another person, and then someone on a magazine, all, like the editor seen it, and then decided, oh, I'm gonna like post this, and yeah,
I have to check out 10,000 hours. 10,000 hours. I think William Bonnet sent me that. But is that a Facebook page? Is it a? I can't
yeah,
remember. It's a Facebook page, right? But it's got a lot of good artwork showing up, and it's sort of the 10,000
yeah,
hours gets you an expert kind of thing. Like
yeah,
I keep two or three, easily three ArtStation pages open on my browser all the time because I'll see something cool, and then I don't want to forget about it. So I like
yeah.
keep the tab open, and they start building up, and I'm like, oh man, I
I,
saw.
I used
Yeah.
I used to be like that as well, but I find recently, I think it's just with the amount of projects I've been a part of, I decided to create a private portfolio site, and I guess that also eliminates the whole like imposter syndrome. Like, you know, when you go on to ArtStation, you see phenomenal artists, and you're like, oh my god, I have so much to learn.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. There's some incredible stuff on there. All right. Well, we're coming up in about an hour here, and we covered a lot of ground. Like, anything else you want to chat about, James?
Um, Not entirely. I think maybe one thing would be like if there's any viewers watching this, well, yeah, two things actually. The first being if there's any viewers watching this who needs a freelancer, you know, I'm available. And the second being, if you want to get into this industry and an artist, the most important thing you can do is be visible. And by visible, I mean, you know, set up an ArtStation page, you know, post your work on it, join Polycount, you know, start a thread on your work, you know, comment on other people's work. If you want to try and get opportunities within the studio, you know, join LinkedIn, create a LinkedIn profile, you know, add art directors and art managers to studios and send them emails, you know. I mean, you could be the best artist in the world, but if you're not visible and nobody knows who you are, then, you know, you're not really going to get far.
Yeah, put yourself out there. Put yourself out there. Also, another thing you could do is make some free tutorials. You know,
Yeah,
put
exactly.
those out there. Yeah, absolutely. And
Because like,
people.
yeah, like if you're a really good artist, and I mean, magazines and all are always looking for people to do tutorials and workshops, and you know that also increases your exposure. You know, and you never know, like that ideal position in the studio for you. You know, you might just end up being the right person at the right time on the right art director's mind when he needs to hire an artist. So, you know, you never know. Like the universe works in interesting ways. So just get out there and, you know, give it your best and 100%. And you know, I don't ever believe that hard work fails. You know, if you put the hard work in, you'll always see a result. So, you know, just give it your all and it will happen. So.
Well, and I know we have to be careful what we talk about, but you mentioned you're also working on System Shock 3.
Yeah.
You know, people put out calls for artists often, right? And so I think you probably have to pick projects carefully so you don't get sucked into a doomed project. But joining a project like System Shock 3, you know, could be a good idea for some people, don't you think?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I guess on that, the one thing I find with freelancing is I probably spend 30% of my time making art, and the 70% is all business and emailing. So the best thing you can do is literally just like spam emails to all the companies you want to work for and do work for, and just say, "Hey, I'm a freelancer. These are the projects I worked on. Here's my portfolio. I'm available for a chat." You know, and you'll like if you send like 50 emails out, you'll at least get hopefully 15 offers or opportunities from that. You know, so yeah, like definitely. I mean, I've been talking to the guys at System Shock since last October, and I've only started working with them in July. So yeah, it's just about opening the communication channels and, you know, keeping visible, staying visible, and you know, and keeping transparent with them on everything, and you know, and just keeping in touch, you know. And if there's one company you want to work for but they're not available at the moment, send them another email in 2 months and follow that by another email in 4 and maybe another email in 8, and yeah, then it'll eventually be like, yeah, okay, great, we're looking, so let's do it.
Yep, I hear that over and over. Get out of your cave, communicate, put yourself out there, get your name out there, do stuff for, you know, like doing training or doing, you know, putting up art galleries, commenting on other people's galleries, like again, putting
Yeah,
your name out there so people kind of know you. Super important, and just as important, probably at the end of the day, is honing your skills and being really good at what you do. So,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
Really informative, James. I'm really glad that you contacted me and we're able to get you on here. And I need to do a better job of getting guys like you on here more regularly. So definitely, if you're in the industry and you're watching this and you want to come on and have a chat kind of like James and I did, or James, you want to send some people my way, that's cool. We'll get more people on here because this is like the biggest industry, I think, for digital artists nowadays, you know, gaming. I just
Yeah,
think this is
sure.
employing the most people. When I was first getting into this, it was visual effects, and that's just not the case anymore, man. It's like
Yeah.
it's this new world, and people want to get into this. And if you want, you know, to hear things from people who have made it and are living this sort of life, then you know, jump in and watch these types of shows. So, all right, somebody saying Androgen called. I got to get out of the cave. You do got to get out of the cave. Got to get out of the cave. One way you can get out of the cave is you can walk to lunch. Get your ass out and walk to lunch. Don't order lunch. Don't eat a bunch of crap that you got laying around in the break room or whatever. And you're free to like go outside, walk to lunch, and walk back. That'll get you out of the cave.
I even have to remind myself of that as well. Like even at the weekends, I'm like, James, you need to go to the grocery store. Like get your ass up and get dressed.
Yeah, totally. Get up, walk on, exactly. Get outside. All right, man. All right, James. Great meeting you. I'll let you go. It's getting late over across the pond, and it's getting to be the time of day where my clients start wondering if I've shown up or I'm just like watching movies. So I got to run. And thanks for watching Pix Fondue. We'll be back. I think next week I've got Ethan, a guy who's worked on Taylor Swift videos. So I'm going to drill him on whether or not he knows Taylor Swift. So
Awesome.
Check that. You're gonna all right, tune in for that one. All right. Cool. All right. Everybody have a great weekend. James, take care. And we are out of here. You bet. Bye-bye.
Bye.